On December 5, 1872, in the middle of the Atlantic, the crew of a ship called Dei Grazia spotted another vessel moving strangely, sails half set, drifting off course, no one at the wheel. They signaled. No answer. They drew closer and shouted. Nothing. When they finally boarded her, they found a fully stocked, seaworthy ship, with not a single soul aboard. The table was set. The cargo was intact. And 10 people had simply vanished. This is the Mystery Archive, the Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in history. Not a legend, not a novel, a real, documented case that has never been solved in over 150 years. Today I lay out what we know for certain, what the evidence rules out, and the most likely explanation science has reconstructed. Open the file with me. First, who she was. The Mary Celeste was a brigantine, a two-masted merchant sailing ship, about 30 meters long. In November 1872 she left New York bound for Genoa, Italy, loaded with 1,700 barrels of raw industrial alcohol. Aboard were her captain, Benjamin Briggs, an experienced, respected, deeply religious sailor, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7. 10 people in total. A routine crossing. Briggs was not a reckless man. He'd sold his share in another ship to invest in this voyage. He brought his family because he expected an ordinary, safe trip. Everything about the departure was normal. That's what makes what followed so unsettling. There was no reason, none, for anyone to abandon that ship. Now the discovery, in detail, because the details are the mystery. When the Dei Grazia's men boarded her on December 5, the Mary Celeste was in remarkably good shape. She was seaworthy. She still had months of food and fresh water. The cargo of alcohol was almost entirely intact. The crew's personal belongings, pipes, boots, oilskins, even valuables, were still in place. Sailors abandoning ship take their valuables. These men took almost nothing. The one thing missing, besides the people, was the lifeboat. The single small yawl the ship carried was gone, and a rope was found trailing off the stern into the water. That one fact changes everything. It means the crew wasn't washed overboard or attacked. They left. Deliberately, in an orderly way, they climbed into that lifeboat and rowed away from a perfectly good ship. The question that has haunted the sea for a century and a half is simply, why? Let's kill the myths first, because there are many. No, it wasn't pirates. Pirates would have taken the cargo and the valuables, and there was no sign of violence, no blood, no struggle. No, it wasn't a mutiny. Briggs was well liked, nothing was broken, and there were no bodies. And no, despite the stories, there was no half-eaten meal with warm tea still steaming. That image comes from a young Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote a fictional short story about the ship years later and invented most of the spooky details the public now remembers. The real ship was tidier and stranger than the legend. So what does the physical evidence actually say? A few hard clues. The ship's chronometer and sextant, the tools for navigation, were missing, taken by whoever left. The last log entry was made on November 25, placing the ship near the Azores Islands, about 10 days and several hundred miles from where she was found. So for 10 days, the Mary Celeste sailed the Atlantic completely empty, steering herself. And there were a few centimeters of water in the hold, and 2 of the cargo hatches were found open, not torn off, opened. Remember the alcohol. Remember the open hatches. Those 2 facts are the key. Here's the leading modern theory, and it's chillingly logical. The cargo was 1,700 barrels of raw alcohol. When the ship reached port, 9 of those barrels were found empty. They were made of red oak, a more porous wood, and had leaked their contents as vapor into the hold. Raw alcohol fumes are heavier than air, invisible, and violently explosive. Imagine Briggs, below deck, suddenly smelling a thick cloud of alcohol vapor filling the hold, and fearing that at any second, a single spark could blow his ship, his crew, and his family to pieces. The reconstruction goes like this. Terrified of an imminent explosion, Briggs makes a fast, rational decision: get everyone off the ship immediately, but stay close. He orders the crew into the yawl. He ties the lifeboat to the Mary Celeste with a long rope, the trailing rope they later found, planning to wait at a safe distance for the fumes to clear, then climb back aboard. It's not panic. It's a captain protecting his people from a threat he can smell but can't see. And then the sea betrays him. A gust of wind, a sudden swell, the Mary Celeste, still under partial sail, lurches forward and picks up speed. The overloaded little yawl can't keep pace. The rope snaps, or the knot fails. In an instant, 10 people in a tiny open boat watch their ship, their food, their water, their only shelter, sail away from them across the Atlantic, empty. There was no explosion. The danger they fled never came. But by then it was already too late. What follows is the quiet horror of it. 10 people, including a 2-year-old child, adrift in an open boat in the North Atlantic in December, with no water, no shelter, and no ship. They didn't drown in a dramatic wreck. They were simply left behind by their own vessel, and the ocean did the rest over the following hours or days. The Mary Celeste sailed on without them, in perfect condition, as if nothing had happened. That, most researchers believe, is the real answer. But, and this is why the file stays open, it's a theory, not a proven fact. There was no scorching, no soot, no sign of the vapor the theory depends on. Some argue Briggs was far too experienced to abandon a sound ship over a smell. Other explanations have been offered: a failed pump making him misjudge how much water was flooding in, a waterspout, even a seaquake. Every theory explains most of the clues and stumbles on one. The alcohol vapor scare is simply the version that fits the most evidence with the fewest holes. The scoreboard of facts. Confirmed: the ship was found seaworthy, well-stocked, cargo nearly intact, crew's belongings aboard. The lifeboat was missing with a rope trailing from the stern. The navigation instruments and ship's papers were gone. 9 alcohol barrels were empty. And there was no sign of violence, fire, or piracy. All of that is documented in the official inquiry at Gibraltar. Still open, the exact trigger. We don't know for certain what made Briggs give the order of vapor, water, or something we haven't guessed. And we will never know the crew's final hours. No bodies, no lifeboat, and no survivor were ever found. 10 people rowed off into the Atlantic, and the sea kept the last chapter for itself. There's a grim footnote, too. The Mary Celeste herself seemed cursed afterward. She changed owners again and again, none of them prospered, and years later a captain deliberately wrecked her on a reef in a clumsy insurance fraud, a scheme that failed. As if the ship, having outlived her crew, was determined to take everyone else's luck down with her. My verdict for this file: the Mary Celeste isn't a supernatural mystery, it's a human tragedy wearing the mask of one. The most likely truth is almost worse than a ghost story: no monster, no pirates, no curse. Just a good captain who made one reasonable decision to protect his family from a danger that never arrived, and paid for it with all 10 lives. The ship survived. The people didn't. And the ocean, as always, told no one why. It's worth pausing on how thoroughly the case was investigated at the time, because this wasn't hushed up. When the Dei Grazia towed the Mary Celeste into Gibraltar, the British authorities held a formal salvage hearing that dragged on for months. The investigator was so suspicious of the whole thing that he openly accused the Dei Grazia's crew of murdering everyone aboard to claim the salvage money, a theory he pushed hard, with no evidence, until it collapsed. The men were eventually cleared, but the ugliness of that inquiry is part of why the true explanation was buried under suspicion for so long. And think about what the ship became afterward, in our imagination. Mary Celeste stopped being the name of a boat and turned into a phrase. We still say a place is like the Mary Celeste when we walk in and find everything in order but everyone gone. Very few real events burn themselves into language like that. It happened because the case hits something primal in us. The empty chair, the set table, the sense that the people were here just a moment ago. The horror isn't a monster. It's an absence. And you? Alcohol vapor, flooding, waterspout, what do you think emptied the Mary Celeste? Leave your verdict in the comments. This is one of the great ones to argue about. Subscribe and hit the bell, a new mystery every day, and a full file every week. The archive never really closes.